This is a surprise.
The nice kind?
Maybe in a few years.
How about now?
I prefer the real.
Deal.
I said the real.
Deal.
Perfection.
In today's episode, we're going to cover Tarq, the water hellhound, and its rise in popularity in the late 2016s and all the way throughout 2017. After we talk about how and why people utilize him, we will also have a short discussion if he still has a place in the current PvE meta, and showcase potential teams you can still use him in. I'll have some timestamps on the screen right now if anybody happens to care. So to understand how Tarq became meta, I think people need to understand how monsters in general become meta. The way I see it, there are two options. The forced meta, where the developers actively push a monster by adding it into rewards, fusions and events, or the passive meta, that is established by either the top 1% of the player base or just some random ambitious guy that does the brunt of the research. You see, Tarq was never a bad monster, but I do think that Comters never intentionally designed him to be this good, and he really was not. High risk, mediocre reward at best, like all of the other elemental counterparts to his. The team up had huge damage potential, but was way too inconsistent for any PvE content due to lack of monsters that had a really good first skill. So most people stopped using him after the first, oh wow, that might actually be good reaction. But as time goes by and more monsters get introduced, the library of potential interesting first skills increases, and so does the viability of Tarq. At the end of the day, this game just always boils down to synergy, speed tuning and rune quality. You see, I always thought that Tarq was mismarketed to be the savior that we have all been waiting for. The facial button for Dragon's P10, which the Summoners War community somehow so desperately wanted. The synergy that I'm talking about right there was of course the holy trinity of Vodahal, Galleon and Tarq. A combo that basically guaranteed either 100% uptime on turn priority or armor break if used correctly. It seemed a little bit too good to be true, and it really was. I remember the good old times of reviewing accounts that have barely gotten into farming giants, but that have already had 2 Tarqs fully leveled, ready to shit on Dragon's P10, just to realize that it was actually much harder than the so-called free-to-play YouTubers claimed it was back in the day. But seriously, if I had $1 for every time I promised myself to get a fast Dragon's P10 team with Tarqs during free run removal, I'd be able to go pay to play now. Please donate to my channel. Now that we've learned how Tarq became such a beast, let's discuss more in detail the synergy between him, Vodahal and Galleon for Dragon's P10. The correct speed tuning of those teams goes something like Galleon moving first, Tarq moving second and Vodahal moving last. The whole idea of Galleon, Tarq, Vodahal is that you'll reduce the amount of derps you will encounter during the first turn of the boss fight. So for instance, if Galleon does not use a third skill, but instead his second skill, which has a rather low cooldown and is most likely going to be up due to the cooldown reduction that you're going to receive after clearing every one of the stages, you will have another chance to have Tarq use his team up and have Galleon apply his first skill, which just happens to have an armor break. If that is not the case, it could still team up with Vodahal or potentially another first skill armor breaker you could use in the other 2 slots of your team. When used correctly, this team used to be one of the safest and fastest teams people could dream of that did not have any of the S tier net 5s for Dragon's P10, such as Valajul, TOAH or Perna, which actually arguably are not even that strong anymore anyways. but it all changed with the addition of the twins. And after a couple of minor changes to how those new net 4s work, it was clear that they were here to stay and here to take over Tarq's spot as one of the most versatile monsters for PvE. But instead of having to carefully tune your monsters and stats, TOAH just basically gave you a face roll button if you got lucky enough to summon one of them, providing guaranteed armor break and some attack by manipulation or intense amount of damage, which made farming Dragons B10 a piece of cake. On top of that, the twins fit in the same monster category as Tarq, which was something like the team up damage dealers, which basically ensured that TOAH will from now on include at least one mechanic in every boss fight that they release to make sure that Tarq is unusable, to kind of make up for the fact how overpowered team up DPS is in some older segments of the game. I mean, if you think about it, that was pretty much the same thing with TOAH and Elemental Rifts, where they changed the groggy stage so that you couldn't use Vertical. It's pretty much the same thing. A monster is too good at one stage of the game, and instead of nerfing it, TOAH just kind of changes the way new content is played to kind of make up for that fact. It's a really interesting way of balancing a game. I haven't seen that before in any other games, but I really like that way of going about things, quite frankly. To be honest, I wish every one of my videos had a happy ending to them, like my last episodes on Veramos or Spectra, but the meta has shifted and the good old Tarq has seen his best days. I still recommend building one Tarq if you have Vertical and Galleon, especially if you pair those 3 units up with 2 twins. You basically don't even have to put on runes to clear Dragons B10. So when it comes to what units you want to run with the Tarq outside of Galleon and Vertical, the most important thing that you need to realize is that Tarq himself doesn't really bring too much to the table outside of amplifying what your allies do. So what you're really looking for is, like I said, high impact first skills, or you want to greatly benefit from getting that additional cooldown reduction of his team up. So units that work very well with him would be something like a Stella first and foremost, since her first skill is really good and also her second and third skill are both very high impact. So you really don't care too much what ability she uses, as long as she gets a turn, she's gonna do great for your team. Another unit that works very well with Tarq, providing that speed buff and also that extra safety. It's not gonna be a very fast team with a chilling in there, and if you're curious, I already made one video specifically about him, which I'm gonna post in the top right hand of the screen right now, so definitely check that out if you want to learn more about that combo. Aegir is another unit that you can pair up with the Tarq. While his first skill isn't too amazing, his second and third skill are both really huge when it comes to Dragons B10, and he greatly benefits from the cooldown reduction, and he does do a decent amount of damage with his first skill either way. Lapis in my eyes is also really interesting with a Tarq. I did utilize that team for the longest time on my beginner account, not really for Dragons B10 in particular. I feel like that has pretty high rune requirements like most Tarq teams, but all in all, her first skill is really high impactful as well, and I really enjoy playing with that synergy. Helea is another really interesting option, which again has armor break on her first skill and armor break and branding on her third. An ability that you really do not want her to utilize though is her second skill. It doesn't really do too much in PvE, so because of that reason she's rather lower on my list, but I just wanted to mention her either way. So when it comes to how you want to rune a Tarq and which stats you want to give him, I think it's pretty tough to give you guys a general idea, simply because Tarq is a very synergy based unit and it really fluctuates in what team composition you're running him in. The biggest difference is going to be, are you going to run him with speed based nukers? In that case you most likely are going to run him on swift runes, because like I said, you do want him to move second. Or do you want to run him with units such as Sigmaros? Do you want to run him with like heavy hitting damage dealers that aren't really speed based and that most likely are going to have less speed than him either way? In that case, you're going to be able to pull off a violent Tarq, which I think isn't really too mandatory, especially with the insane base speed that he has. I would definitely recommend for people that just want to get into Dragons B10 to give him a Swift set. He greatly benefits from that. For all the other stats, I feel like it's basically just as much as you can get. You want to get 85% crit rate so that you can get 100% crit rate on the fire units, which is going to be enough. As much crit damage as possible, as much attack as possible, but pretty much it's all about the speed tuning for this unit. He's gonna die no matter what, so just don't focus on any defensive stats no matter what. It's all about just offense is your best defense, and that's how you should be runing a Tarq. Alright, so I think this is gonna be it for today's episode. It took me pretty long to think of another unit that I want to discuss, but I felt like Tarq was one of those units that back in the day really pissed me off when it first was released, since, like I said, pretty much everybody was building it and nobody was actually able to pull it off. So this episode was something very personal. I felt like setting the record straight. If you guys enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave a like. It really does support me a lot. It helps my videos rank, and since Tarq is, like I said, sort of an outdated unit, it does also probably help out some people in the future by having them not build stuff that's sort of outdated and not as viable as it used to be or never really was in the first place anyways. So that's that. Also, let me know which unit you guys want me to talk about next. I will be discussing certain controversial units in a format like this, but I can also just cover like random units out of fun, do some Guild War videos, stuff that takes way less time to like write scripts about and do some research, but you get the idea. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and until then, see you guys in my next video. Bye!